The world sees strength in muscle,
This is a
size,
very serious
and power.
situation.
But
and
sometimes
although I have a
the
smile
most
on my
dangerous
face, I
battles
can't
are
help
the
but
ones
just laugh
happening
at
silently
the current
inside the body.
situation that
Chris Combs was known as a giant, a man whose physique commanded respect the moment he walked into a room. In the fitness world, people called him a beast, a machine, even the 10,000 pounds bodybuilder. Years of relentless training, strict discipline, and iron determination had turned him into an inspiration for millions. To the outside world, Chris looked unbreakable. But one quiet afternoon would prove how fragile even the strongest bodies can be. That day began like any other. Chris had just finished a lighter workout than usual. Nothing extreme, nothing alarming. He sat at his kitchen table, sipping water, scrolling through his phone. But then something felt wrong. A strange discomfort twisted deep inside his abdomen. At first, Chris ignored it. Pain was nothing new to him. Years of lifting extreme weight had trained his mind to override pain signals. Muscle tears, joint strain, exhaustion, he had pushed through it all before. But this pain was different. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't muscular. It felt deep, internal, wrong. Suddenly, the room began to spin. His hands started shaking. His vision blurred. Chris tried to stand, tried to call out, but before he could say a word, his massive body collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud. Chris. His wife, Laura, rushed in, panic flooding her face. Seeing a man who rarely showed weakness lying unconscious on the floor shattered her sense of safety. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone and dialed emergency services. "My husband just passed out," she cried. "He's huge, he's healthy. This isn't normal." Paramedics arrived quickly and rushed Chris to the emergency room. At the hospital, doctors ran basic tests. His vitals were unstable, but nothing immediately obvious appeared on the surface. One doctor glanced at the chart and shrugged. "He's a big guy," the doctor said, casually. "Probably dehydration, stress, or low blood sugar. Happens all the time." Laura felt her stomach drop. "No," she insisted. "He never passes out. Never. Something's wrong." Reluctantly, the doctor agreed to run more tests. As Chris slowly regained consciousness, his face turned pale. Sweat poured down his forehead. He groaned in pain, clutching his stomach. That's when everything changed. During a deeper abdominal exam, the doctor suddenly froze. The boredom vanished from his eyes, replaced by alarm. He stared at the scans again and again. This can't be right. The images revealed something terrifying. Chris's digestive system was dangerously swollen, twisted, and inflamed. Years of extreme dieting, massive food intake, heavy supplementation, and constant physical stress had silently damaged his gastrointestinal tract. An extremely rare internal condition had gone unnoticed until now. "If we don't operate immediately," the doctor said, rushing toward Laura, "his stomach could rupture. He could die." Laura's knees nearly gave out. "But he's so strong," she whispered. "How could this happen?" The doctor sighed heavily. Strength on the outside doesn't always mean health on the inside. Within minutes, Chris was rushed into emergency surgery. Inside the operating room, tension filled the air. Surgeons worked at lightning speed, releasing pressure, correcting damage, and fighting against time. Every second mattered. Hours passed like years. Finally, the surgeon emerged, removing his mask. "He's stable," he said. But this was dangerously close. Very close. When Chris woke up in recovery, he felt weaker than he ever had in his life. Tubes surrounded him. His body felt unfamiliar, fragile. Laura held his hand, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was unbreakable," Chris whispered. "I was wrong. Recovery was long, painful, humbling." The man who once lifted unimaginable weight now struggled just to stand. He had to relearn how to listen. The drive to the hospital felt longer than usual. The road ahead symbolized uncertainty, fear mixed with hope. Amy tried cracking jokes to ease the tension, but Tammy stared out the window, lost in thought. "I'm thinking about the consequences," Tammy admitted. "What if I fail again?" Amy reached over and squeezed her hand. Then we fight again. Together. For the first time in a long while, Tammy smiled. A small smile, but a real one. Inside the hospital, the warmth of home disappeared. Cold lights, clean hallways, professional voices. Nurses moved quickly, checking vitals, explaining procedures, preparing them for what lay ahead. When they were separated into different prep rooms, the weight of the moment finally hit. Amy lay staring at the ceiling, memories flooding her mind. Childhood bullying, years of struggle, becoming a mother, and promising herself she'd always be there for her boys. "I have to do this," she whispered. "For my kids. For me." In another room, Tammy's heart pounded as nurses prepared her for surgery. She had faced judgment her entire life, online hate, public criticism, and her own harsh self-doubt. But today, she chose hope. As both sisters were wheeled towards surgery, fear and courage walked side by side. This wasn't just about weight loss. It was about survival, redemption.
Seconde chance.
And for the first time, both Chris Combs and the Slayton sisters learned the same truth. Real strength isn't about how much weight you can carry. It's about knowing when to let go and choose life. To his body, how to train responsibly, how to eat for health, not extremes. Months later, Chris returned to the public eye not as a symbol of excess power, but as a teacher of balance. In an emotional letter to his fans, he wrote, "I collapsed because I ignored the warning signs. Don't wait for your body to break before you respect it." The world was stunned, not because Chris fell, but because he chose to change and survive. And this time, he was stronger on the inside. While Chris fought his silent internal battle, another life-changing day was unfolding in the Slayton household. The morning sun gently poured through the curtains, bathing Amy and Tammy Slayton's home in a warm glow. It was a day they had dreamed about for years, argued over, feared, hoped for, and nearly given up on countless times. Today wasn't just surgery day. It was proof that change was finally possible. Amy sat at the kitchen table, tapping her fingers anxiously beside a cup of lukewarm coffee she was no longer allowed to drink. Every few seconds, her eyes darted to the clock. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," she whispered. Across the room, Tammy sat wrapped in a blanket, unusually quiet. Her silence spoke volumes. For someone known for loud emotions and strong reactions, this calm meant everything. "This ain't just surgery," Tammy finally said softly. "This is my last chance." Amy looked at her sister with pride. "I know, Tam. I really do." The drive to the hospital felt longer than usual. The road ahead symbolized uncertainty, fear mixed with hope. Amy tried cracking jokes to ease the tension, but Tammy stared out the window, lost in thought. "I'm thinking about the consequences," Tammy admitted. "What if I fail again?" Amy reached over and squeezed her hand. "Then we fight again. Together." For the first time in a long while, Tammy smiled. A small smile, but a real one. Inside the hospital, the warmth of home disappeared. Cold lights, clean hallways, professional voices. Nurses moved quickly, checking vitals, explaining procedures, preparing them for what lay ahead. When they were separated into different prep rooms, the weight of the moment finally hit. Amy lay staring at the ceiling, memories flooding her mind. Childhood bullying, years of struggle, becoming a mother, and promising herself she'd always be there for her boys. "I have to do this," she whispered. "For my kids. For me." In another room, Tammy's heart pounded as nurses prepared her for surgery. She had faced judgment her entire life, online hate, public criticism, and her own harsh self-doubt. But today, she chose hope. As both sisters were wheeled towards surgery, fear and courage walked side by side. This wasn't just about weight loss. It was about survival, redemption.
Seconde chance.
And for the first time, both Chris Combs and the Slayton sisters learned the same truth. Real strength isn't about how much weight you can carry. It's about knowing when to let go and choose life. Rewritten, powerful script, strong and emotional, 2,500-word style. Today was not about critics, not about doubters, not about the millions of voices that had questioned her worth for years. Today, Tammy Slayton wasn't thinking about the people who said she would fail again. I've survived worse, she whispered to herself. I can survive this. Across the room, Amy sat quietly, her hands folded, her body tense with emotion. The air felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves understood the importance of what was about to happen. The sisters exchanged a glance, no words needed. They both nodded, barely able to speak, as doctors entered the room one final time to explain the procedures. Everything sounded distant. Risks, instructions, recovery timelines. Amy swallowed hard when the anesthesiologist stepped closer. Just count backward for me, he said gently. Amy's voice trembled. 10, 9, 8. In the next room, Tammy closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed as her thoughts drifted to her family, to Amy, to a version of life she had only ever imagined. A life where she could breathe without gasping, walk without pain, live without shame. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe. And then everything faded to black. Hours later, Amy was the first to wake. Her body felt heavy,
Aching. Disoriented.
She blinked slowly, trying to understand where she was. The soft beeping of machines filled the room. A nurse noticed her eyes flutter open and smiled. You did great, the nurse said. The surgery was successful. For a moment, Amy didn't react. Then it hit her. She had survived. Tears streamed down her face as her chest shook with sobs. I did it, she cried. I actually did it. Across the recovery ward, Tammy slowly regained consciousness. Pain pulsed through her body, but beneath it was something unfamiliar, relief. A quiet, peaceful relief she hadn't felt in years. When the sisters were finally reunited, the room filled with emotion. Amy carefully reached for Tammy's hand, afraid of hurting her. We made it, Amy whispered. Tammy nodded, her vision blurred with tears. This is just the beginning, she said softly. No more excuses. Recovery was anything but easy. There were days filled with tears, moments of frustration, emotional breakdowns that came without warning. Tammy had to relearn boundaries, with food, with habits, with herself. She struggled with irritation and grief for the routines she once clung to. Food had been her comfort, her escape, her shield. Letting go felt like losing an old friend. Amy faced her own battles. Anxiety crept in during quiet moments. She questioned whether she was strong enough to maintain this new lifestyle, whether she would fail her children, herself, and her sister. But every day, they reminded each other why they started. They celebrated the smallest victories, choosing healthier meals, walking a little farther, standing a little longer. Each pound lost wasn't just weight. It was guilt being released, fear being shed, self-hatred slowly dissolving. One evening, Tammy broke the silence. This surgery didn't fix everything, she said, but it gave us a chance. Amy smiled softly. And we're not wasting it this time. Weeks passed. Slowly, steadily. The sisters stood side by side in front of a mirror. What stared back at them wasn't just physical change. It was resilience.
Growth. Hope.
For the first time, the future didn't feel impossible. It felt real. And yet, this story did not begin. Nor did it end here. This is a fictionalized narrative inspired by 1,000-Pound Sisters. The hospital parking lot glowed pale gold as the sun rose over Kentucky. Morning light filtered through the windows, touching the cold walls with warmth. Inside, Tammy Slayton lay awake in her hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. She had waited for this day for years. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the thin blanket. Her mind raced, memories colliding like waves. Failed diets, family arguments, moments of surrender, moments of stubborn determination. She had lost count of how many times she had promised herself, this time will be different. But today felt different. This wasn't another attempt. This was survival. Nurses moved quietly around her, checking vitals, speaking softly. Tammy's breathing grew shallow as reality set in. This was happening. No turning back. As she was wheeled down the hallway, the ceiling lights passed overhead like ticking seconds. Each one marked a chapter of her life. The ridicule, the pain, the loneliness, the nights she cried herself to sleep wondering if she would ever escape her own body. Amy waited nearby, her face pale with worry. When their eyes met, neither spoke. Amy reached out, squeezing Tammy's hand one last time. "I'm here," she whispered. Tammy nodded. "I know." The operating room doors closed. Time stretched. Families waited. Nurses whispered. Clocks ticked loudly in the silence. Then, finally, success. Recovery was slow, painful, unforgiving. But something inside Tammy had shifted. For the first time, she wasn't running from pain. She was facing it. Months later, Tammy stood outside under the open sky. She took a deep breath, not shallow, not strained, but full.
Free.
Amy stood beside her, watching with pride. They had both changed. Not just in size, but in spirit. They still had struggles ahead. Temptations.
Doubts.
Setbacks. But they were no longer prisoners of hopelessness. They were survivors. And as they walked forward together, one thing was clear. Their story was never about weight. It was about courage. About choosing life when giving up felt easier. About proving, not to the world, but to themselves, that change was possible. And this time, they were ready. Full, rewritten, powerful script, strong, emotional, cinematic. More times than Tammy Slayton could count, she had stood at the edge of giving up. She had whispered it in hospital rooms. She had screamed it during lonely nights. She had felt it every time another diet failed, another promise broke, another headline mocked her pain. But this time was different. This time, she was different. Tammy lay in her hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, her breath slow but unsteady. The room smelled of antiseptic and quiet fear. Machines hummed softly, unaware that they were guarding a moment years in the making. Across from her, Amy stood silently, gripping Tammy's hand as if letting go would make everything fall apart. Amy tried to smile, but her eyes told the truth.
Fear.
Exhaustion. And a worry so deep it had stolen her sleep the night before. Amy hadn't slept at all. Not only was Tammy about to undergo life-altering surgery, Amy herself was carrying a personal storm that threatened to undo everything she had worked so hard to rebuild. A storm she hadn't yet told her sister about. "I'm glad you're here," Tammy said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her chest. "No matter what happens today." Amy swallowed hard. "I'm not going anywhere, Tammy," she replied. "I swear." As nurses entered the room and began preparing Tammy for surgery, something changed. For once, Tammy didn't crack a joke. She didn't hide behind sarcasm or deflection. She closed her eyes and made a silent promise to herself. "If I survive this, I will keep fighting." Amy watched as Tammy's bed was rolled toward the hallway. The door slowly closed behind her sister, sealing her inside a room where strangers now held her life in their hands. The silence, afterward, was unbearable. Amy sat alone, her thoughts spiraling. Tammy's life was now in surgery, and Amy's own future felt just as fragile. Amy's trial begins later that same morning. Amy found herself in a place far colder than the hospital. The courthouse. The walls were hard. The air was unforgiving. And the stakes were just as high. This trial wasn't just about the law. It was about Amy proving she was more than her mistakes. That she was a good mother. That she deserved another chance. As Amy took her seat, her mind kept drifting back to Tammy. "Please let her be okay," Amy prayed. "I can't lose her today. Not today." The prosecutor began speaking, laying out Amy's past struggles in harsh detail. Poor choices. Moments of weakness. The crushing weight of fame mixed with motherhood and mental exhaustion. Each word landed like a blow to the chest. Amy clenched her hands together, fighting the urge to cry. When it was finally her turn to speak, she stood slowly. Her voice shook at first, but she forced herself to continue. "I'm not perfect," Amy admitted. "I made mistakes. Big ones. But I love my children. I love my family. And every single day, I try to be better than the day before." For the first time, the room was silent. Not judgmental, not mocking, just listening. Amy felt heard. 2 battles, one day back at the hospital. Hours dragged on as Tammy remained in surgery. Doctors worked carefully, fully aware of the risks, but hopeful because of Tammy's discipline and progress leading up to this moment. Finally, a surgeon stepped out to face the family. The surgery was successful. Relief crashed through the room like a wave. Tears flowed freely. Tammy was alive, and she had taken a massive step toward a new life. By nightfall, Amy received her verdict. The judge acknowledged her struggles, but also her effort to change. Amy wasn't given a free pass, but she was given something far more important: a chance. As Amy exited the courthouse, her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. Tammy is awake. She's asking for you. Amy didn't walk. She ran. Reunion. When Amy entered Tammy's hospital room, she barely recognized her sister. Tammy looked weak, surrounded by tubes and machines, but her eyes were filled with something Amy hadn't seen in years. Hope. You did it, Amy whispered. Tammy smiled faintly. So did you. In that moment, both sisters understood something profound. Survival wasn't just about weight loss, or court decisions, or public opinion.
It was about accountability, love,
and choosing to keep going when quitting feels easier. They held hands as night fell. Episode of Redemption Season 7. Episode 7 wasn't just about surgery or courtrooms. It was about redemption, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between 2 sisters determined to rewrite their story. But life didn't slow down, and soon, the family was hit with news that would shake them all. The arrest. One calm Kentucky morning, Tammy sat in her living room scrolling through her phone when a headline froze her blood. Family concerns grow after Amy Slayton's arrest.
No, Tammy whispered.
Not Amy. Denial hit first. Amy had always been the caregiver, the emotional center of the family. Yes, she had struggled after her divorce. Yes, the pressure of motherhood, weight loss, and fame had crushed her at times.
But an arrest?
Tammy immediately called Amanda. Tell me this ain't real. On the other end, Amanda sighed deeply. Tam, it's true. And it's worse than what people are saying online. What really happened fictionalized. In this fictionalized account, Amy's arrest wasn't driven by cruelty or malice. It came from exhaustion, loneliness, and choosing the wrong coping mechanisms. Months of anxiety attacks, sleepless nights, crushing isolation. Amy told herself it was temporary, just something to take the edge off, something to help her breathe. But one terrible night ended with flashing police lights. Amy sat alone in a holding room, her hands shaking, mascara smeared down her face. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of public judgment. She was afraid of disappointing her sons. I made a mistake, she whispered. A huge one. The family gathers when Amy was released. Tammy didn't yell. She didn't lecture. She hugged her. That alone broke